Paul Brunton explains the world's perennial wisdom. The Evolution of Consciousness, the Grand Purpose of Life. Video Series 4, Video number 12, presented by the Paul Brunton Philosophic Foundation. What is the use, ask many questioners, of first, an evolution of the human soul which merely brings it back to the same point where it started, and second, of developing a selfhood through the long cycles of evolution, only to have it merged or dissolved in the end into the unselfed absolute? Is not the whole scheme absurdly useless? The answer is that if this were really the case, the criticism passed would be quite a fair one, but it is not the case. The unit of life emanated from the Overself begins with the merest glimmer of consciousness, appearing on our plane as a protozoic cell. It evolves eventually into the fullest human consciousness, including the intellectual and spiritual. It does not finish as it began. On the contrary, there is a grand purpose behind all its travail. There is thus a wide gulf between its original state and its final one. The second point is more difficult to clear up, but it may be plainly affirmed that our individuality survives even in the divinest state accessible to us. There it becomes the same in quality, but not identical in essence. The most intimate mental and physical experiences of human love cast a little light for our comprehension of this mystery. The misunderstanding which leads to these questions arises chiefly because of the error which believes that it is the divine soul which goes through all this pilgrimage by reincarnating in a series of earthly forms. The true teaching about reincarnation is not that the divine soul enters into the captivity and ignorance of the flesh again and again, but that something emanated from the soul, that is, a unit of life that eventually develops into the personal ego, does so. The Overself contains this reincarnating ego within itself, but does not itself reincarnate. It is the parent. The ego is only its offspring. The long and tremendous evolution through which the unit of life passes from its primitive cellular existence to its matured human one is a genuine evolution of its consciousness. Whoever believes that the process first plunges a soul down from the heights into a body, or forces spirit to lose itself in matter, and then leaves it no alternative but to climb all the way back to the lost summit again, believes wrongly. The Overself never descends or climbs, never loses its own sublime consciousness. What really does this is something that emanates from it and that consequently holds its capacity and power in latency, something which is finited out of the Overself's infinitude and becomes first the simple unit of life and later the complex human ego. It is not the Overself that suffers and struggles during this long unfoldment, but its child, the ego. It is not the Overself that slowly expands its intelligence and consciousness, but the ego. It is not the Overself that gets deluded by ignorance and passion, by selfishness and extroversion, but the ego. The belief in the merger of the ego held by some Hindu sects, or in its annihilation held by some Buddhist ones, is unphilosophical. The I differentiated itself out of the infinite ocean of mind into a distinct individuality after a long development through the diverse kingdoms of nature. Having thus arrived at consciousness of what it is, having traveled the spiral of growth from germ to human, the result of all this effort is certainly not gained only to be thrown away. Were this to happen, then the entire history of the human race would be a meaningless one, its entire travail a resultless one, its entire aspiration a valueless one. If evolution were merely the complementary return journey of an involutionary process, if the evolving entity arrived only at its starting point for all its pains, then the whole plan would be a senseless one. If the journey of man consisted of nothing more than treading a circle from the time of our emergence from the divine essence to the time of our emergence back into it, it would be a vain and useless activity. It would be a stupendous adventure, but also a stupid one. There is something more than that in this movement. Except in the speculations of certain theorists, it simply does not happen. The self-consciousness thus developed will not be dissolved, extinguished, or reabsorbed into the whole again, leaving not a trace behind. Rather, it will begin a new spiral of evolution towards higher altitudes of consciousness and diviner levels of being, in which it will cooperate as harmoniously with the universal existence as formerly it collided against it. It will not separate its own good from the general good. Here is part of the answer to this question. What are the ultimate reasons for human wanderings through the world process? That life matters, that the universe possesses meaning, and that the evolutionary agonies are leading to something worthwhile. These are beliefs we are entitled to hold. If the cosmos is a wheel which turns and turns endlessly, it does not turn aimlessly. Evolution does not return us to the starting point as we were. The ascent is not a circle, but a spiral. Evolution presupposes that its own possibility has always been latent within the evolving entities. Hence, the highest form is hidden away in the lowest one. There is development from the blindly instinctive life of animals to the consciously thinking life of a human. The blind instinctive struggles of the plant to sustain itself are displaced in the evolutionary process by the intelligent, self-conscious human efforts. Nor does this ascent end in the Vedantic merger or the Buddhistic annihilation. It could not, for it is a development of the individuality. Everywhere we find that evolution produces variety. There are myriads of individual entities, but each possesses some quality of uniqueness which distinguishes it from all others. Life may be one, but its multitudinous expressions do differ, as though difference were inherent in such expression. Evolution, as mentalistically defined by philosophy, is not quite the same as evolution as materialistically defined by Darwin. With us, it is simply the mode of striving through rhythmic rise and fall for an ever fuller expansion of the individual unit's consciousness. However, the ego already possesses all such possibilities latently. Consequently, the whole process, although apparently an ascending one, is really an unfolding one. The cosmic evolution will, through continuous rebirths and karmic tuition, purify and ennoble all humankind eventually, even if the process requires millions of years. Quotes were taken from the notebooks of Paul Brunton, Volume 16, Enlightened Mind, Divine Mind, and The Wisdom of the Overself. Paul Brunton, 1898 to 1981, a best-selling British author of a dozen books, spent much of his early life researching the original sacred teachings of Western and Eastern spiritual traditions. He traveled the world to discover and communicate with Christian, Kabbalistic, Vedantic, Buddhist, Taoist, indigenous, and Sufi masters. Blending the richness of his own spiritual experience and inquiry with these ancient and contemporary teachings, he developed a philosophy and path of practice that suits life in the 21st century, one that expresses the greatest wisdom and love available to humankind. Regardless of how it is named, we each have a divine soul, an overself or higher self, that is with us here and now, waiting to be realized. Paul Brunton's writings are a source of deep spiritual guidance for all those interested in living a divinely inspired life.